and whomever else is joining us this morning, and Boker Tov. Many apologies for the 30-minute delay. Believe me, we tried to get this to work properly. So, Daniel's telling me to hold on. Okay. Okay. Boker Tov and Shalom Aleichem, Lapid family, and whomever else is joining us this morning. I apologize tremendously for the delays. We were technical issues that really had no control over. So this morning, the reading will be from Vayikra chapter 25. And all of that, I misplaced my notes. Okay, so chapter 25, that's Leviticus, chapter 25, verses 25 through 39, I believe. No. And the basic topic is redeeming the land. Very interesting. Okay. Okay, Vayikra 25, 29 through 38. So just real quick before we get started, Barak and I went to San Antonio the past week. Not so much for a vacation, though we did take some time just to kind of chill out, no tourist kind of stuff, visiting elderly friends, and much appreciate the travels that people take through life. And as I become older myself, I'm looking at the circumstances and situations of the people that are older than me. And it's a wondrous thing. It really is that Hashem grants us life at all. It's really a wondrous thing. Though there are difficulties, but yet, how can we complain? When we have been given this conscious body to live in the creation. And I guess the tragic thing is for many people is that they are not tuned in as to who brought them to this world and why. And that's what we seek to learn. And I'll also say this. I noticed that a rumor has popped up again that Barak and I flew off to Malibu. I don't know where this keeps coming from. I'm going to suggest to the Beit Din that we do perform an investigation to find out who is starting these rumors. All right, rumors. I think there's recluse. Is that the correct term? Gossip. I don't know, but nevertheless, let me go ahead and get started on the parsha today. There again is Vayikra 25. This is Leviticus chapter 25, verses 29 through 38, and just share some insights from the Chumash and from the Midrash Rabbah. Let me adjust a little bit here. So I'm going to start a couple of verses ahead of what I just mentioned, and this is the redemption of the land. The land shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine. That is Adonai. For you are sojourners and residents with me. In the entire land of your ancestral heritage, you shall provide redemption for the land. Now, here's where we start. If your brother becomes impoverished and sells part of his ancestral heritage, his redeemer, who is closest to him, shall come and redeem his brother's sale. If a man will have no redeemer, but his means suffice, and he acquires enough for its redemption, then he shall reckon the years of his sale and return the remainder to the man to whom he had sold it, and he shall return to his ancestral heritage. But if he does not acquire sufficient means to repay him, then his sale shall remain in possession of its purchaser, until the Jubilee year, that is the 50th year, the reset, the interesting economic reset that is peculiar to Judaism. In the Jubilee year shall leave and return to his ancestral heritage. If a man shall sell a residence house in a walled city, its redemption can take place until the end of the year of its sale. Its period of redemption shall be a year. But if it is not redeemed until its full year has elapsed, then the house that is in a city that has a wall shall pass in perpetuity to the one who purchased it. In other words, the original owner has lost it for his generations. It shall not go out in the Jubilee year. The houses in the open towns which have no surrounding walls shall be considered like the land's open field. It shall have redemption and shall go in the Jubilee year. As for the cities of the Levites, the houses and the cities of their ancestral heritage, the Levites shall have an eternal right of redemption. And what one will buy from the Levites, a house that has been sold, or the city of its ancestral heritage, shall go out in the Jubilee year. In other words, if I understand this correctly, what it is saying, it doesn't matter what the purchaser does. In the Jubilee year, it goes back to the original owner. For the house of the Levi cities, that is their ancestral heritage among the Bnei Israel, but the fields of the open land of their cities may not be sold, for it is an eternal heritage for them. If your brother becomes impoverished and his means falter in your proximity, you shall strengthen him, proselyte or resident, so that he can live with you. Do not take from him interest and increase, and you shall fear your God and let your brother live with you. Do not give your money for interest, and do not give your food for increase. I am Adonai, your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan to be God unto you. And it ends right there. So, just reading some quick comments out of the Chumash. So, the very first verses, the redemption of the land, as noted, an ancestral field can be sold only for the number of crops it will yield until the Jubilee year, when it reverts to its original owner. The following passage places responsibility upon the relatives of an impoverished seller to redeem the land even before then and return it to its original owner. As long as the family can raise the money to pay fair value for the field, the purchaser is required to sell it to them. This law, a further expression of the principle that the land is God's and cannot be sold in perpetuity, as the passage begins, for you are sojourners and residents with me. Very interesting. Now, for the part about impoverishment, one should not sell his ancestral plot unless he becomes impoverished. And even then, he should try not to sell all of it. So, verse 27, which reads, Then he shall reckon the years of his sale and return the remainder to the man to whom he has sold it, and the purchaser shall return the original owner, the ancestral land. Then he shall reckon, for example, if he bought it with 10 crops remaining before the Jubilee, then each crop is worth 1/10 of the purchase price. And that is from Rashi. A residence, now further for verse 29, a residence house in a walled city. This verse refers to a home in a city that had a wall around it from the time of Joshua. The law of this redemption is almost diametrically opposed to that of a field or a home in an open town, whereas the field cannot be redeemed for the first 2 years, but may be redeemed at any time thereafter, and the house in an unwalled city may be redeemed even immediately. A house in a walled city can be redeemed only until the first anniversary of the sale. Therefore, it remains a property of the buyer in perpetuity. And that is another comment from Rashi. What I'd like to do is get to the ethics of the impoverished person. Let me see if I can find this. Now, impoverishment is two cases are mentioned in this parsha. One is where the person who is experiencing the impoverishment, how his relatives are close, or those who are close to him should help him, or if he has some saleable items that he should sell it, even portions of his land, but not all of it. But then impoverishment is spoken about again, if I may just skip to verse 35, and I think this is kind of interesting. If your brother becomes impoverished and his means falter, now as before, the means did not falter. There was still some hope of redeeming the property because either the owner had some assets to sell or he has relatives who are willing and able to help. But if your brother, verse 35, if your brother becomes impoverished and his means falter in your proximity, you shall strengthen him. And that goes for the proselyte or the resident, so that he can live with you. Do not take from him interest and increase. And you shall fear your God and let your brother live with you. Do not give him money for interest and do not give your food for increase. Okay, interesting comments on that. Let's see here. What does okay, so preventing poverty. Rambam rules that the highest form of charity is to step in with help to prevent a person from becoming poor. This includes offering him a loan or employment, investing in his business, or any other form of assistance that will avoid poverty. The basis for this principle is a commandment in our passage, you shall strengthen him. If your brother, now this is for verse 35, if your brother becomes impoverished, your fellow Jew has begun to lose his money, but has not yet become poor. It is your responsibility to slow his decline and help him regain his prosperity. This verse refers to him as your brother. Actually, there's a Hebrew word here. If I had my magnifying glass, the print is extremely small. Even with reading glasses, it's a little difficult for me to see the vowel markings on this. So I won't bother to say it, but it's something that's very akin to aki, but it's almost like akida, which reminds me of akeda, the binding, which is a more intimate term than Amayid Tad, okay, which means fellow. I probably didn't pronounce that right because I can't see the markings very well. One is your brother and the other is your fellow. And the latter means literally one of your people, maybe fifth cousin, who knows. But the teaching by Rashi is basic in the life of both the individual and the nation. It is much harder for someone to emerge from bankruptcy than for him to be helped before his business fails. Nevertheless, as the latter passages show, no matter how low a person falls, his fellow Jews have a responsibility to help him. So too, in the history of the nation, though Israel has suffered countless reversals in its history, none of them is cause for despair. When the national destiny slides downward in one part of the world, Jews in more secure places must step forward to help. And when all seems to be lost, it never is. Just as God built worlds and destroyed them and built anew, so the Jewish nation has suffered appalling defeats, but always starts again and perseveres. Very interesting idea there. So Part of verse 35, if your brother becomes impoverished and his means falter in your proximity, the commentary on that says with you. The verse stresses twice that you must regard his plight as with you, not as something that is unrelated to your own welfare. Both of these expressions bring home the importance of everyone feeling a responsibility to help him, and you shall strengthen him. Do not wait until he becomes poor. When a donkey's load begins to slip from its back, even one man can adjust it and keep the donkey from falling. But once the animal has fallen, even 5 people cannot get it back to its feet. That's very interesting. I have never dealt with donkeys, but I can very easily visualize what they're talking about there. The proselyte or resident, as used here, a proselyte is someone who has accepted all the commandments and becomes a Jew. And that is the Hebrew, I believe, reads Ger Zadok. Yes, that is a righteous Gentile. I believe that's what the definition of that is. A resident is a non-Jew who has accepted, now here we go, 7 Noahide commandments. As the sages express it, okay, who is a resident? Anyone who undertook not to worship idols, but who may eat non-kosher meat. Our rabbi, Mordecai, has written a book on the Noahides, and I think it would contradict, I think it's a very good paper, well thought out, and it would contradict some of what this commentary says about the Noahide commandments. So for verse 36, regarding interest and increase, these two terms are synonymous. In effect, therefore, the prohibition against interest is mentioned twice, so that those who charge or pay it are in violation of 2 commandments. Kli Yakar suggests that the word looks like nishada, interest. I'm sure I did not pronounce that properly. Is derived from the same root word as biting in Hebrew, and describes what happens to the borrower. The transaction bites into his wealth. Now, in our present day, there are all sorts of advice, especially for those on their adult journey, about interest payments and avoiding interest wherever possible. The word increase describes what happens to the lender. His fortune increases while the borrower decreases. And you shall fear God. Without this fear, it would be difficult to restrain someone from taking interest, because it seems reasonable to receive something in return for the use of one's money. However, what that does ignore is that the living God owns every single thing. Now, I understand that there are banks in the world, not Christian, of course, that loan and don't charge interest. Now, I don't know how those banks sustain themselves, because all of us have come up in the system we're currently living in, and there's always been interest of some sort for borrowing money. Now, there may be cultures in the world that have learned to pool capital and make and sustain the bank in a different way. I'm not privy to that kind of knowledge, but you can see God's economy is a very different sort of basis, has a different basis to it. Okay, so on verse 38, which is the last verse, you say, who took you out? And this is referring to Adonai. Just as in Mitzrayim, that is Egypt, God differentiated between the firstborn and those who were not firstborn, even animals. And that's a godly thing there for sure. So too, he will know if someone has illegally accepted interest, no matter how he tries to launder the transaction. Alternatively, God liberated us from Egypt so that we would accept all of his commandments, even the difficult ones, such as the prohibition against charging interest. For most of us, it would probably be easy to not charge interest, but paying interest, that is very difficult. I admit that. And I guess we need some enlightened people to help us through that so that we personally do not violate those commandments. There's a saying, when we know better, we do better. But this one is a very tough one because of the type of system we live in. Let's see here. Let me jump to the Midrash real quick. So Behar chapter 34. I'm going to pull this in front of me so that I can see this a little better. The Midrash, wait a minute. Let me back up. If your brother becomes impoverished and his means falter with you, you shall strengthen him. And that is verse 35 in the Chumash, Vayikra, chapter 25. The Midrash quotes a verse from Psalms, as Tehillim, in order to explain our verse's use of seemingly incongruous word emok, meaning with you, in the phrase umata yado amok, and his means falter with you. Thus it is written, praiseworthy is he who contemplates the needy. On the day of evil, Adonai will deliver him. That's Tehillim 41, verse 2. Having cited this verse, the Midrash cites various explanations. Abba Vor Yirmiyah said in the name of Rabbi Meir, this verse is referring to one who causes his good inclination, Yetzer HaTov, to rule over his evil inclination, Yetzer Hara. This verse is referring to one who gives a peruta to a poor person. Rabbi Yochanan said this verse is referring to one who buries an unattended corpse. The rabbi said this verse is referring to one who saves another from the evil kingdom that seeks to kill him. Rav Huna said this verse is referring to one who visits the sick. For Rav Huna said, whoever visits a sick person causes the latter's sickness to be reduced by 1/60th. Well, that is an interesting concept there. Taking a look at the notes for what I just read. I'll tell you what, before I get to the notes, I'm running out of time already, but the Midrash interrupts this discussion to cite a question asked on Rav Huna in his response. They asked Rav Huna, if so, let 60 people go up to visit a sick person, and he will go down from his sick bed and go with them to the market. Rav Huna answered them, each visitor removes 1/60th, but only if they love the sick person as themselves. Nevertheless, even if this condition is not met, the visitors do bring some element of benefit to the sick person. Midrash resumes its discussion, citing the basis for each of the explanations of Psalms 41:2, that is Tehillim 41:2. According to the opinion of Abba or Rabbi Yirmiyah, who said in the name of Rabbi Meir that this verse is referring to one who causes his good inclination, Yetzer HaTov, to rule over his evil inclination, Yetzer Hara. The basis for saying so is that it is written, Adonai will guard him from the Yetzer Hara. According to this, to the opinion of Isi, who said that this verse is referring to one who gives a peruta to a poor person. The basis for saying so is that it is written, and restore him to life, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, who said, this verse is referring to one who buries an unattended corpse. The basis for this saying is that it is written, and he will be happy in the earth. According to this opinion of the rabbis who said that this verse referring to one who saves another from the evil kingdom that seeks to kill him. I'm going to get to the notes very quickly here. Let me see if I can finish this last one. The basis for saying so is that it is written, and you will not give him over to the desire of his foes. According to the opinion of Rav Huna, who said that this verse is referring to one who visits the sick. The basis for saying so is that it is written, Adonai will fortify him on the bed of illness. The Midrash, let's see, I think, okay. I keep wanting to stop, but there's some more good stuff, more good verses in here. Rabbi Yuna said, it is not written. Here, praiseworthy is he who gives to the needy, but rather praiseworthy is he who contemplates the needy. The verse is saying that you should look at the needy person and contemplate how you may gain merit through him. Now, that is a very interesting concept that has self-interest and the interest of the needy person in mind. The Midrash recounts the story of a sage who beautifully demonstrated what it means to contemplate the needs of the needy. Rabbi Yonah, when he would see someone from a wealthy family who lost his wealth and was embarrassed to take charity, would go to that person and say to him, since I heard that you have inherited property overseas, take this article for yourself. When you make money by selling the property you inherited, you will give the article back to me. Then, when the recipient would get back on his feet and come to return the article, Rabbi Yonah would refuse to accept it and say to him, I have already given you the article as a present. My. Whoa. So, there was one saying here about burying a corpse. And we read a note on this. This refers to a person who has died with no relative available to attend to his burial needs. Jewish law obligates anyone who comes across this person to bury him, and no one is more needy than a corpse. True enough. A corpse can't do anything for itself. That is so true. Let's see here. Referring to the sick person. Sick person's enjoyment of the visitor's pleasant company improves his condition. The Gemara in Bava Metzia implies that the visitor takes the 60th upon himself, and that despite the suffering he will undergo, he must still go to visit the sick person. That is, if every visitor takes 1/60th of a sick person's illness, every sick person should simply have 60 visitors, and he will be completely cured. Wow. Oh, there's so much more. Maybe we will have opportunity to go through even more exposition on helping the needy in a further chapter of our Aliyah today. I thank you for your time and apologize profusely for the technical issues that happened today. And may your day be pleasant. And may your week be pleasant. Shavua Tov.